Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the MX Endurance Podcast, where we look at everything that's been happening in the world of endurance sports. My name is Tim Ford, and I'm joined by the penultimate legend, the sexy shepherdess, the sexiest voice in triathlon himself, James Bale. Jimbo, welcome back to the podcast, mate.
Man in Amsterdam, mate. I'm on the continent again. How are you doing?
Good, mate. No, very, very, very good. Big week. It's the complete opposite of last week a little bit, when last week we were sitting there for maybe 10 minutes racking our brains before we hit record going, what the fuck are we going to talk about this week?
We
And this
stretched
week
it out, though. We stretched it out well last
did.
week. I think last week was a good test of our ability to just waffle about stuff, but still, we've remained relatively interesting, I think.
I woke up this morning, so we've now, because of time zones, we record a Friday morning in my time, so it's like 7 a.m. at the moment. But I woke up this morning to a message, and it was somebody saying, "Oh, you guys have been pretty down on triathlon lately." I said, "How can we be down when there's nothing to talk about? Like there's been no triathlon talk to really cover."
No, but I do feel that, though. I feel like we've come out of Christmas a little bit not bagging on the sport, but a little bit more ruthless about what we do and don't want to see from triathlon, and probably
don't just take no prisoners.
Exactly, and I think that's probably a good thing, because you don't want to be. I mean, we love the sport. We want to represent the sport, but we don't want to be. We're not PR for triathlon, are we? We've got to be its biggest critics to try and get the best out of it.
I did see again, I'm not. This just came to mind then, because I think we're going to touch. But I saw there was that clip that the PTO put out this week of Lionel Sanders, where he's like referring to his, I don't fucking give a shit about what my fucking critics thinking. Fuck you, and I don't fucking care. And I remember thinking that seems like an irrational response. And I know that everybody cops a bit of shit online, but yeah, I hope again, I always worry because I don't think we're mean or anything, but I'm like, is he talking about us? Like, are we
No,
included?
He doesn't know who we are. He doesn't know who we are. But no,
he doesn't. Didn't he save your ass at the Collins Cup in 2020 when you broke your ankle or you fell over bowling or something, and he came over and helped you up? And
yeah, well, there was a moment. Our eyes met across a crowded room, type thing. But no, I saw that response. Now it was an edited clip of a I don't know, man.
From a YouTube
video. I worry about that man. I just think that was a little aggressive, wasn't it? A little aggressive, maybe.
Again, a bit of aggression is a good thing, I think.
A bit of aggression is not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing, but if you without the athletes, the sport wouldn't exist. Without the people that talk about the sport, no one would talk about the sport. So to turn around and be that vitriolic to people that are part of the ecosystem that we all exist in is a bit strange.
No, I think if you actually watch the video that they clipped that from, because this is the problem with the internet, isn't it? You say anything and people can clip it out and take it out of context and use it for whatever they like. In the video that he filmed that, which is, I actually think it's one of his better videos because he's like super emotional and I like it. It sort of fits, and you can tell he's frustrated, and he's whereas you take it out of context, it makes him look like a dick. But that's the problem, isn't it? Like, if I would actually be like, if I was him, I'd be like, fucking guys, the fuck. What are you doing to me here?
give that specific clip some context, please, so I don't look like I'm insane.
Yeah, a little bit. But yeah, as I said, there's plenty to talk about this week. I was telling you just before we hit record. So a little injury update, because I know people love the injury update. I finally saw the sports doctor after last week's episode, and I got a cortisone injection in my foot. So sat down with the doctor, Dr. Corin Cunningham, absolute legend. Loves triathlon too. We ended up talking for like 30 minutes just about triathlon, and he was impressed with my knowledge of like the olden days. We were talking about Greg Welch and Mark Allen and Macca and Jürgen Zach and all that sort of thing. But basically said my injury is a really good one to have, really localized and everything. So he said that the PRPs, he doesn't think we would need it. I might need it, but he said we're going to go cortisone first, settle down the inflammation, and see how we go. And if we do, and not.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was telling you, so I went for a run yesterday, mate. And again, I'm almost embarrassed to say this, but I got home from my run, and it's the first run in, honestly, probably 3 years that was completely pain-free. And I fucking burst into tears, mate. I couldn't believe how just relieved I was to actually just run without something hurting. And it's funny how you don't realize you get so used to dealing with pain that it sort of becomes normal, and then you lift that pain away and you're like, oh fuck, running's actually fantastic. Like this is great shit. So that's been a good week, mate. I'm very happy about that.
Yeah, man, and we both been on that journey, and we both had hamstring and tendinopathy issues, and that pain is because it's not really acute, is it? You know, it kind of moves around and it tempts you a little bit. It fools you
Mm.
into thinking it's gone away, and then and I can remember the joy in those first few runs I had when I finally knocked that on the head, and feeling like your body's doing what you want it to do, and it's all coming together. So yeah, it's good to hear it, mate. It's good to hear that you're back in the game. So Tromso
Yeah, again,
midnight
so
marathon coming our
starting to
way, eh?
build back, which is, yeah, mate, yeah. The doctor actually said by winter I'll be good to go. So yeah, I'm excited. We'll see what happens, but it's just, yeah, it's very good to be able to actually just go for a run and not be like going ow, 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 ow. So it's a pleasant change. But enough of that, James. This podcast is the official podcast of MX Endurance, the world's premier endurance sports community, created by four-time world champion Chris McCormack. I have not asked you yet this year, but I am going to ask you this week, mate. You've been part of MX since bloody day dot. What's something that you like about the MX Endurance community?
Right now, the thing I like most about the MX endurance community is the fact that you're fucking off, aren't you?
Thanks
But
for that, mate. I appreciate the support. No, you're right. I've again, I don't know how, like, behind the scenes stuff or whatever, but at the end of last year, I don't know if people watch this on YouTube. You see at the end of it's the Mana Group logo comes up. The MX formerly folded into Mana, and started this year I got offered a new role. I'm now the manager of athletes and teams for Mana Group. So I am the manager. Like, I deal with the sponsorship side for athletes, and now I deal with the sponsorship side for our projects. So I got given this opportunity at the start of the year, which I was like, yes, I will definitely do it. But it meant that I would have to step away from what I do with MX. So we made that official this week. We've got a replacement who's coming in. And again, we've hinted about all the changes and stuff that are coming. We're going to probably be unveiling what that looks like to the community in the next week or so. We're going to be me and this person. Again, I'm being quite vague. Are going to do a live video to introduce who they are and then talk through the changes. But I've seen the new branding and stuff that we're going to launch and all this stuff. So it's pretty exciting changes. But yes, I will be moving on from MX. I'll still be doing the podcast because I think it's a good thing. Again, we've said there'll probably be some changes to the podcast and stuff as well. But yeah, I will no longer be the general manager of MX Endurance, or in fact, I am no longer the general manager of MX Endurance. But again, good stuff. 5 years. Thank you to everybody who I worked with for 5 years at MX. It was a dream come true. Thank you, Chris, for the opportunity to come and turn my passion for triathlon into a job. And it's led to some incredible opportunities and things and friendships and all sorts of stuff. So exciting times, mate.
mate, I'm fighting back the tears.
Like me after my run yesterday.
Yeah. Well, no. All good things come to an end, eh? And it all rolls on. So yeah, here's to what's to come.
Yeah, exactly. And like I said, it's not like I'm moving on to more, I don't know, different, more challenge, new challenges. That's the way to put it. I've got some, I think the sponsorship side of stuff is definitely where my interests really, really lay now, and being able to marry up my legal training with the sports stuff. I love it. Like it's funny how, like, I've had a pretty full on week this week, some pretty hard discussions and things, and you sit back after, a mammoth 2-hour meeting that's pretty heated, and you're like, fuck, I love this. Like, how good's this shit? Like, there's something about that. What's the word? Like the fight or the challenge that I quite enjoy. So it's good, very exciting. Good to be it's interesting to be on the other side of it a little bit too, and it gives you. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that's happening in endurance sports from a sponsorship point of view at the moment that I find really disturbing, actually. Like, and again, not to name brands or names or athletes or anything like that, but it's funny how everybody sort of you have a pretty good idea of what's going on, and I've had brands almost bragging to me recently about how. Sorry, but there was a little cut out there. About that they've been able to sign all these athletes for almost no retainer, and all these athletes just want to take product deals and stuff like that. And you sit there going, "Oh, fucking hell, that's sort of not ideal."
No.
And
No,
so there's things happening at the moment. Like, it's a challenge.
From a very isolated perspective of that particular deal, that could probably seem like a good thing. But if you're living within a sport that's trying to thrive and grow, if you take a step out of that, take a step back as a brand and look at the bigger picture, do they really think watching athletes take less and less money for sponsorship deals and look and move more towards product only deals, is that a good thing for the bigger picture of triathlon?
Yeah, it's one of the things I've seen happen, and there's been a lot of focus, I think, the last 2 years about the increases in prize money, and we're going to probably talk a little bit about this soon about the introduction to the PTO and stuff, and how much it's going to increase the professionalism of the sport. And I think we saw the top earners last year with some big numbers, and mostly from the PTO. And that was always kind of my concern. Is I worry that if you start to pay the athletes this big prize money, do they start to become a bit more complacent with their sponsorship because they're like, oh, well, I've made $250,000 from
Mm.
races, so therefore, oh, if I don't get a $50,000, $100,000 deal for this, it doesn't matter. And that's kind of one of my big concerns, sitting on that side of the fence now, is when you're doing what you can to always push the value of your athletes up, and then you hear back. And I can use an example. I'll be as vague as possible. But when you're trying to push X athlete and say that X athlete is worth X amount of money, and then X brand comes back to you and says, well, we're in discussions with this other high level athlete and they don't want to be paid, it's a pretty tough conversation to then turn around and go, well, that high level athlete is saying they're worth nothing. Well, I'm trying to convince you that my high level athlete is worth a lot. Like it's
Yeah, that was
tough. And
when you say you give an example, you gave an absolute vague answer with no details whatsoever. But cool.
but no, it's a fascinating time at the moment, and I feel like, I mean, you've seen it, that there's so many brands that are stepping out of the sport. Canyon seems to have snapped absolutely everybody up, and I look at that and I wonder, is that because Canyon have gone, we've got a huge sponsorship budget to spend, or is it because the value of sponsorships have decreased and therefore they're able to sponsor more athletes for the same budget? Like, these are the sort of things that people probably
both of
just see
those
it and go,
things
wow, it's incredible.
combined with the fact that a lot of bike brands are focusing less and less on triathlon bikes.
Exactly.
And Canyon probably
Yeah.
see that as an opportunity to be the triathlon brand. The bike that if you're going to get a tri bike, I'll probably get a Canyon because all the pros seem to be riding that, so that must be the one. I think we discussed a little bit last week, didn't we? The way Specialized are pulling away from the sport, and their last tri bike was their last throw of the dice on that. I mean, I think these things come around again. I can't see all bike brands staying out of the sport indefinitely. I think it'll cycle back around. But I do think at the moment, from a personal point of view, I think the bike brand market is getting out of hand in terms of how much high-end bikes cost. I think it's becoming untenable to carry on like this. I think prices have to come down at some point.
I feel like we're going to see a big shift in the bike industry in the next couple of years because of a number of reasons. I mean, I'm sure if a person is listening to this podcast who are probably a triathlete, so you've probably owned a bike or have tried to buy a bike the last couple of years or thought about it, it's impossible. Like, it's been so hard to not only buy bikes, but the wait time. Like that bike above my shoulder, I think it took 6 months to arrive, and that was fast. Like, the problem is that during the pandemic, every man and his dog went out and bought a bike. So these bike brands suddenly were like, shit, we need to up our supply, probably up our prices. And because of a scarcity of components of things, everything went a little bit more high end.
Yeah, I mean,
And
it's
again,
very reactive,
I'm assuming a lot of stuff
short-sighted response to it.
But what happened? So again, I know this from bike stores I deal with, and the brands that I talk with, was they were like this pressure. Oh shit, the lead time on bikes is 18 months now. You need to order. So all these bike companies and bike shops and have put in these orders, and then suddenly the demand's dropped off because everybody who wanted a bike has got a bike, and and there's suddenly this glut of people who probably bought a bike at the start of the pandemic.
And the second-hand market is flooded at the moment.
Correct.
As well.
So I know that, again, a bike store.
And this is what I mean about the untenable nature of the pricing. Because, right, for example, that bike over your left-hand shoulder, how much would that cost off the shelf to your standard
$25,000.
$25,000. And if I'm going to spend $25,000 on a bike, I ain't going to want to wait 6 months for it, mate. If you're taking 25 grand out my bank account, that bike's got to be there the next day.
I mean, this one's maybe it's a project one, so it's a custom paint job or whatever. But I just
know
feel
what
like,
I mean.
We're going to see
it's silly money.
And then you look at the fact that you've got, so these bike brands are like literally selling more bikes than they can produce. So they're thinking, well, why then do we need to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars getting athletes to be seen riding our bikes when we literally can't keep up with demand? So you can see that's probably a part of the pullback. And I understand Specialized is a bit different because they're focused on gravel and e-bikes and stuff. But there's going to come a time when those bike sales really start to slow down because of that secondhand market, because everybody's spent $25,000 on a bike and go, this thing's lasted me 10 years. I'm not buying a new one. And that's when you see that. I think you'll see the shift back, because bike brands will suddenly have bikes that they need to push. And, gravel and e-bikes and stuff will hit their peak like everything else. And the great thing about triathlon is you want to talk about a captivated audience who's happy to spend money. It's pretty good. So
Yeah.
I think you'll see, and I mean, Specialized have done this before. I've spoken with Chris a lot about how when he sort of shifted to Specialized, and Specialized were like, oh, there's triathlon's not a thing. We can't track it. We're not going to focus on it. They brought out that nose cone shiv, sold like gangbusters, and like, oh, it's actually triathlons. People like triathlon bikes. So it goes in ebbs and flows, and I think we're just at a period where there's this sort of dip and a whole bunch of factors. So it's interesting, but I didn't think we're going to get into this. This wasn't one of my list of things to talk about this week, but it's interesting. And again, I think people on the outside, if you're just a fan of triathlon or whatever, like it's worth paying attention to, and keeping an eye on those brands that are, I guess, sticking with the sport, and I guess trying to support the brands that are around the sport, because it would be a pretty sad state of affairs if Canyon was the only brand that made triathlon bikes in the next couple of years. So there are other alternatives out there too, I guess, is
Exactly, and
trying to save
those
it.
but those brands that stick with the sport are the ones that are more likely to invest the time and the energy and the technology into testing and really in producing bikes that are bespoke for triathlon, rather than some of the high end brands that come in and out of the sport with really expensive bikes that like Stella Artois, reassuringly expensive. Do you know what I mean? It's like just because it's a well known brand that's really pricey doesn't mean that they've put all the energy and effort that some brands that have been with the sport for a very long time might have put into their bikes.
Well, again, Trek is an example. So the bike over my shoulder we keep talking about is a Trek. They didn't change their speed concept for how many years? Because they were like, we can't make the bike faster.
Yeah.
Like, we have done all this testing, and the model is as aerodynamic as we can make it. And that wasn't until they found a way to make it faster that they did. And we saw that bike set the course record in Kona last year. We've seen it be involved with some of the fastest splits across things. It's like, okay, yeah, there's a reason why they changed. And yeah, I agree with what you're saying. But enough of us waffling, mate. Let's get into the news this week and things to discuss. And we are going to start with a big race. Some say one of the biggest races. In fact, I say that in the world. Challenge Roth have announced their pro men's and women's fields, and I'll tell you what, it's looking pretty fucking good, mate. To be honest, now I'm just going to quickly go through. And again, I saw there's a lot of people on the list. I'm not going to go through every single one. I've picked out a few key people. We're going to start with the women's race because that was announced yesterday. On the women's field in Challenge Roth in June 2023, we have got defending champion Annie Haug. We have multiple world champion Daniela Reif. We have a current Ironman world champion Chelsea Sodaro. We have one of the favourites for the Ironman title last year who got the penalty, Laura Phillip. We have one of our favourites and who has stormed onto the scene with that incredible result at the end of last year. And I shouldn't say stormed on the scene. She's always been on the scene, but had that incredible result in Israel last year, Ruth Astle. And then Fenella Langridge, we also saw so prevalent in that Ironman Kona race last year. So that's the women's field. The only names that I can really see missing there are Kat Matthews and Lucy Charles Barclay. And I know that Reese is racing the men's race, so I think we might see Lucy Charles on that start list too. Then the men's race, we've got defending champion Magnus Ditlev. We have second place from Kona, Sam Laidlow. We have two-time Kona winner Patrick Langer. We have Joe Skipper, Sebastian Kienle, Daniel Beckergaard, and Ben Knut on that start list. Again, with the exception of the Norwegians going short course, the only male name that I can really see missing there is Jan Frodeno. But mate, they are world-class fields at Challenge Roth this year.
Yeah, man. Those are some start lists. Haug, Reef, Phillips, all on the start line, racing each other. I'm well up for that. I think that's going to be fantastic. Really interesting to see what Reef brings to the party when it comes to this race, because we saw last year she had that incredible race in St George and then just didn't fire in Kona when it came time. And I'm intrigued to see how she's bounced back from that and what she's done in the off season and how she's going to come. I want to see her come out firing at Roth, mate. I really, really do. Anne Haug is fantastic. She's got the run of all runs, and Laura Phillips is like an all rounder who could really, really be in there mixing things up. Same with Ruth Astle.
I see Laura Phillip a little bit as like the heir apparent a little way. Like I feel like Laura Phillip is the one that we've yet to see really reach her potential. We saw that incredible Hamburg race last year where she almost equaled Chrissy's Roth record on the Hamburg course, and I know she's still quite bitter about what happened to her in Kona because she got that penalty that sort of ended her day.
Mm.
What I'm curious about here, and I'd like to sort of discuss a little bit, is we've heard a lot about the controversies around Ironman changing their format this year, moving or splitting the men's and women's race. What impact's that going to have on the race? And a lot of the conversation I saw, especially from Brad Culp, I think he was the guy sort of pioneering this chat, was, well, it makes Roth now the most important long distance triathlon of the year. I feel like Roth have heard that and they're like, challenge accepted. We're gonna do what we can to sort of make that happen. And I feel like like I said, there's a few names that are missing, but fucking hell, mate, you couldn't ask for a better field, I think, in terms of the men's and women's race.
No, indeed, they've got the checkbooks out, haven't they? Chelsea Sodaro as well on the women's side, a name that I neglected to mention a minute ago, will be. It's. I mean, it's some of the best in the world lining up to see what can happen. In Roth is such an epic race in itself. I think I will be pulling for Reef myself on the men's
Yeah,
side.
same.
On the men's side, Ditlev and Skipper and Sam as well. It's do you think Magnus will go in with a mindset to try and get that 9 seconds that he missed out on last year?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be, again, looking at this race, I think it's going to be interesting to see how the race shakes out a little bit, because it could go very similar for Magnus how it did last year, where you're going to have that swim pair of Sam Laidlow, Daniel Beckergaard, and Ben Canute at the front, and then can Magnus bridge that gap quickly and then ride away with Sam, or is it going to be something different? Are people going to know what Magnus did last year and not let him do it? Where they're going to go, no, mate, you can do the work. Go on, have a crack. We're not gonna chip in for you. Or are we going to actually see, because we always, whatever you want to say, Sam Laidlaw has now got the fastest bike split in Kona by quite some margin. Is he a better biker than Magnus? Is Sam, in fact, I think Sam is the highest ranked cyclist under the PTO rank. I don't quote me on that.
I'd like to see him and Magnus like working together in a way to try and bring the race together. The problem is Sam's a superior swimmer, so Magnus will have to do some catching.
Yeah.
What do you think Joe's plan will be going into a race like this?
Joe's plan is going to be to minimize the gap to the swim and then get up as quickly as he can to that group without trying to take someone like Patrick Lang with him. I think the thing I like about Joe is Joe would back himself. If he got off the bike with any of those guys, he would back himself to outrun them. Mm-hmm. And again, Joe, you look at Joe Skipper and he doesn't look like a Patrick Lang. He doesn't look like a Craig Alexander. He doesn't look like a Ben Canute. Like, he doesn't look like a natural runner. But Joe is one of the strongest runners in triathlon. Like, the guy can run like the fucking clappers. And I like that he's able to back him. Like, again, I would, with the exception of Patrick Langer, I would back Joe to outrun every other person on that start list. And even Patrick Langer, I think he could outrun him or run close to him.
Yeah, and you're quite right. He hasn't got you look at him from a physicality point of view, he doesn't look like the gazelle that he is. He runs with a muscularity that most of the good runners do not. Most good runners you see look fluid and look like they're not even trying, whereas Joe looks like he's trying, but he's running hell's quick. He's the same.
Fucking fast.
He's the same height as me and relatively the similar build. And I know what
kilos.
exactly, and I know what it's like to cart this across a half marathon or marathon course, and for him to do it as quickly as he does is, he's got some skills in that department.
What did he do in sub 7? Was it 236? 236
something
with no prep,
like
post COVID, after a 316 bike split. Like, yeah, I'm going to make a prediction very early this year. I think we're going to see the course records for both men and women crack. I think we're going to see them go down quite significantly because we have such high quality athletes who are going to be pushing each other. I think Chrissy Wellington's record. Here's a call. I think we're going to see the women go sub 8 hours.
Oof! Now that would be cool. That would be cool.
That's there you go. There is a big call this early in the season. I think we could see the women go sub 8. If the conditions are right in Roth, I think we could see that happen.
So here's your question on the women's side. Who are you pulling for and who do you think is going to win? I mean, it's hard to tell early season, but from now, you're allowed to change as we get towards the race.
I really like Laura Phillip. Like I said, I think that Laura Phillip is for me in women's long distance racing is probably the most exciting athlete to watch at the moment. And I feel like I really wish we could have seen her and Chelsea have a bit of a battle in Kona last year. And again, Chelsea was exceptional. Uh, I am curious to see how things go as well with people now. Chelsea Sodaro has a humongous target on her back. Again, no one's going to be, not that they let her, but there's going to be a lot. There's the way Chelsea's going to race is going to be different. Danny is somebody who's probably used to that. And what I've come to accept with Daniela Reef is that she's just become a little unpredictable because maybe if I say I don't pick her now, she's going to go on the win thing. I wouldn't be. There's 4 names on that list in particular.
I'm still here.
Sorry, it just keeps coming up saying it's a disconnect.
Yeah.
There's 4 names on this list who I think could. So anyhow, Daniela Reef, Chelsea Sodaro, Laura Philipp. I would be surprised. Wouldn't be surprised if any of them walked away with it. I'd like to see Laura Philipp do it. I'd like to see Laura Philipp have the year that I think she deserves. It's not that she hasn't had a good year, but she had COVID last year. She missed out on St George. I'd really like to see Laura Philipp dominate this year. So I'll go Laura Philipp, and then men's I'm going Joe. Joe Skipper, mate. Joe Skipper's going to go out there. He's going to set a new course record. He's going to show everybody that he's a force to be reckoned with, and then he's going to go into that Nice race with again. People are going to go, yeah, Joe Skipper's a real contender here for Nice. So that's where my money is.
Okay, well, you took the words out of my mouth on the women's side. I think for me, I think like I see Laura this being a race for the likes of Laura Philipp. I see what the qualities that she has in an athlete really coming to bear on a race like this. I think Daniela Reef will be there to show the world that she's not that her performance in Kona is not the end of her career, and I think she'll perform really well, and I think she'll be up there. She's obviously got every chance to win this thing because if she has one of her Daniela Reef blinder days, then there is no one can compete. But I think Laura Philipp will be the one to watch on this one. On the men's side, mate, I'm pulling for Ditlev, because I just want to see him. I want to see him step up to that level that I think he can go beyond where he did last year. I think he's got that.
Mm-hmm.
He's got that record in his sights, and I think
ran solo again at the 240 solo run in 15 minutes ahead of everyone else it's some pretty serious.
Exactly,
pretty serious performance.
I think Joe will push him really, really hard.
He did sit in on the bike a lot though. Like that's the thing. He let Frodo do the majority of the work on the bike. So that's kind of where my head is at, is a little bit because again, if Magnus has a weakness, it's the run. And we've seen after some really hard bikes that his run legs haven't been there. And I really feel like you're not.
If Magnus has a weakness, it's the run. Are you sure it's not the swim?
Mate, his swim is not bad. I reckon he's not that far back. Like he's a minute back from the really, really good swimmers. Magnus is, in my opinion, like that's the minimum standard, I guess you'd say. He's not a front pack swimmer like the Sams and stuff, but he's also not a bad swimmer. Whereas his run has been his Achilles heel. It's been good recent times, but I just feel like if people went into this race and said Ditlev can ride a bike like the Clappers, I'm not going to let him sit in, because we also know he can drop a 240 marathon, and he has to fucking push the power that we know he can push for 180k. I would be curious to see if he's, and again, I wouldn't be surprised if he can. I just feel like if I was racing Magnus, that's what I'd be doing. I'd be making him get off the bike with tired legs and seeing if he can still drop.
It's true. It's true. If I was in a group with Magnus chasing the lead group, then I would be saying, "Look, mate, we ain't going to catch them unless you do the work."
Exactly.
But
and he's going to have to catch him. He could do what he did
I'm
last
happy
year,
to lose if you don't want to do the work.
The other thing that all going to have to be careful of as well is that Patrick Langer factor. We know that Magnus did what he did last year to avoid Patrick Langer coming with him, and we saw how much time Langer lost to him. Langer's going to have people like Joe and that around him, Sebi, who are going to be able to help, hopefully pull it up. So it's going to be a very different race, I think, to last year, just because we have that. There's a real difference in the field. We've got those people who are slightly worse swimmers who are, like, again, I love you, Joe. Your swim sucks, bro. So you're going to be coming from you're Kiwi got in me. But he's going to be riding through. He's going to be riding past the Patrick. He's going to be riding past the Sebi. He's going to be, probably taking them with him a little bit, which means if they do catch up.
I've forgotten what you said at the start. Is Beckergaard going to be there?
Yep, but he'll be at the front. Daniel will be at the front with Sam and Ben.
Absolutely. I mean, he's always. I love the way that man races. He's a great bloke. He's one of my favorite athletes on the planet.
Daniel is like incredible. I genuinely think he is an athlete who we have not even scratched the surface of what he is capable of.
Mm.
Like Daniel Beckergaard to me is one of the most exciting prospects in long course triathlon. Again, Magnus had an incredible year this last year. Daniel had an off year, but I feel like Daniel is fire. So
Indeed, and so the same with Sam Laidlow. I think Sam Laidlow is that sort of athlete that we could see just take off from here on in. I just love the way that he's French and he sounds he sounds like
Tom,
he's the best sounding Frenchman I've ever heard.
I'm again I'm still not convinced a little bit. I still feel like he had that incredible performance in Hawaii, and you can't take it away from him. He ran so much better than I think anybody expected. Yeah. If he does it here, I would, he will shut me up. And I'm always, as I say, happy to be proven wrong. For me, there's still a question mark over Sam Laidlow, so we'll see.
Oh, mate, there's a
Yeah,
question
I'm
mark over
really
everybody.
excited for this race. I mean, definitely.
You're only as good as your last race.
What I would love
so,
to see, I really hope, and again, I don't know where it's going to happen, but we know that the PTO, we've heard that the PTO aren't doing a long distance race this year. I'd love to see them actually really collaborate with Roth here around broadcast or something. I'd love to see the PTO get involved and really up the broadcast for this race. It would be like this could be an opportunity to really showcase a long distance race outside of Hawaii. So fingers crossed. Let's see.
Fingers crossed.
After a brief little break, we're back because technology is not always our friends, Jimbo, but we are persevering, mate. We were just wrapping up our Challenge Roth talk, and we are now going to go from one very, very, very long race to one extremely short race because it came out this week that Super League Triathlon Arena Games are going to be having a very special guest athlete lining up in Montreal. None other than the Lion himself, Lionel Sanders, has thrown his hat in the ring to have a go at the shortest form of triathlon. What do you reckon?
I love it. I love it. Good on him. Good on him. Why not? He's here for like careers are finite, mate. The amount of time you get to spend at the top of a sport with people asking you to go and try things is limited. He's obviously had that invitation. There's probably some money on the table. Why not go and experience what it's like to race the Arena Games? I fully back that and I endorse that and I love it and I support him in that endeavor. Just because my commentator's opinion is that he's probably not going to do particularly well on that doesn't mean that I don't love the fact that he's going to go and do it. Now, don't get me wrong, the Arena Games is a fantastic opportunity for someone that can absolutely slam the turbo trainer to put some pain into the other bikers, and I think Lionel Sanders is made for that part of the sport. But I see him struggling on the swim and the bike element a bit too much for that. Sorry, swim and the run element for a bit too much for that bike to really negate those issues. But no, go and have some fun, Lionel, and let's see what you can do. And if you want to prove us wrong and win the thing, then have at it. But I doubt it. What do you think?
I love that he's put his name up for this. Again, I'm all for it. I really like to see people step out of their comfort zones. And it's interesting because I think a lot of the conversation I've seen online and I've had with some of the guys who are going to be racing him and stuff is around his swim. They're saying, his swim deficit is just going to be so big compared to the other guys. And my question to you, Jimbo, is because the swim's 200 meters in a pool. I reckon most people can probably swim pretty fast 200 meters. It's that, when you get over 200 meters, like my 200 swim splits are pretty fast. It's when you start asking me to do 600s and 800s and 1000s that the pace, really sort of drops off. Do you think that, maybe he has got a pretty good top end for that? I mean, I would not expect him, the real good short course guys are probably going to be swimming close to 2 minutes. 2 minutes for 200 meters, 100, in a minute per 100, roughly, 30 seconds per 50, fast swimming. I wouldn't expect Lionel to be there, but the gap might not be, we might not talk about a 30-second gap here. Like we might be talking, 5 or 10 seconds maybe.
You're absolutely right. I think some of the backlash he's received from the internet, we'll just call it the internet as one, it's a little unfounded because I think, like you say, over a 200-meter sprint in the pool, he's going to be behind. There's no doubt of that. How far behind can you get over 2 meters? Over 200 meters is, he's only going to be that far behind. And then is that going to be enough for him to bring it back on the bike? It's the run, I think, that is going to be the issue because these guys run quick, mate. They run quick. And you're quite right. It's not like he's signed up for an Olympic qualifier, a short course Olympic qualifier to try and qualify for the Olympics. It's not like he's going to be embarrassed to that level. I just think that it's less the swim that's the issue. I think the bike he will more than hold his own, more than hold his own. I think the run is where he will really suffer because they go so quickly over those distances. It's unreal.
I saw a comment this week on Facebook, and it was basically saying, there's no person who can suffer the way Lionel Sanders can suffer, and that's what's going to give him, that's why he's going to do well, is because his ability to push himself and suffer. And my response to that would almost be like, I actually think most of these guys can suffer pretty well, to be honest. And
You don't
there's a
get to
big
that level
difference
without
between,
being able to.
and I think what Lionel Sanders, for the ability to suffer for a long time, he is one of the best, if not the best. I put Christian Blumenfeld in that ring too, but there's a difference between suffering at that level for hours and then the level you need to suffer at for 2 minutes. It's like 3 minutes. Like it's different. If you guys are listening, jump on your trainer, set your power to, I don't know, 150% FTP and hold it for 10 minutes. The first couple of minutes are going to be okay-ish, and then you're going to fall off. Set that thing to 1,000 watts or 800 watts or 200-300% FTP. Hold it for a minute. It's a different sort of suffering, right? Like it's different. And again, I'm just throwing numbers out there, but yeah, I'm not expecting him to. I don't think he's going to win the thing, but I am really keen to see, because we've always said that he's sort of that. We know he's a very good. Loves to ride on Zwift, loves to use the treadmill. It's sort of made for him.
Yeah.
If there was a longer version of this, if this was like a 70.3 distance, he'd be hands down my pick. Like, I wouldn't pick anybody but Lionel Sanders for the win.
No, absolutely not. But what annoys me about the reaction is the whole sort of, oh, he's going to be rubbish. He ain't going to win it. He ain't going to do it. Insinuating that he shouldn't try. Now,
I know.
like I said at the start, careers are short. Experiences are slim. Why not go and have some fun? And I think the sport as a whole should be celebrating that. Someone who races at his level over the long distance, 70.3 in Ironman distance, wanting to go and shine a light on the arena games by just being there and having some fun, and knowing that maybe he's not the best suited for this, but still going and doing it anyway. I think that's a fantastic example to set to a lot of people who watch the sport.
So one of the things I've always admired about Lionel Sanders as an athlete is his willingness to take up challenges that are so far out of his comfort zone. I mean, I still think him putting up his hand and saying, "Yes, Jan Frodeno, I will race you one-on-one at a race purpose built for you," was one of the most impressive things I've seen him do, because I know people thought he was good. He was never, ever going to beat Jan Frodeno. I'm sorry to say this, internet. Jan Frodeno had his number easily, comfortably. We saw it. The race lasted for 100 meters, and then Jan went off and did his thing. But Lionel knew that. And whatever he said, he knew that going into that race, he was going to be on the back foot the whole day, and he still went and fucking did it. And that's what impressed me so much about him, and that's what continues to impress me, is that he won't be defined by those sort of things.
He didn't just go and do it. He went and did it from start to finish. He didn't blow up or give up. Even when it became clear that he'd lost the thing, he still fought to the bitter end, and that's what I like about the man.
Same.
I don't think that fight to the bitter end attitude is going to translate particularly well to the arena games when it comes to those run sections where those short course guys that he's racing are racing like utter gazelles on those treadmills. Now, don't get me wrong. He can suffer, and he knows how to suffer. And just because his run form isn't the best in the world, we've seen him go fast. He's like, what did you compare him to? The bumblebee that the science says shouldn't be able to fly, but does. He's that. And I'm intrigued to see what happens to him. I hope he has fun out there. I really do.
I would love to see an Arena Games exhibition match where you get, like, let's say, Lionel Sanders, Sam Long, Joe Skipper, Sam Lalo, Magnus Ditlev. I mean, we've seen Daniel Beckergaard do it before. I know Daniel doesn't like us to bring that up so much, but he had a bike crash like a week before. But
like
you
2
get
days
those,
before. He got hit by a car like 2 days before.
Sebastian Kienle. Who else would you, like, literally the long course guys, and get them to do one of these races? I think that'd be cool to see. I'm actually really, again, looking at this year, I'm much more interested in the Arena Games than I was last year, because I think we are seeing a better caliber of athlete. Not to discredit who did it last year, but I am more interested this year, and having Lionel do it has certainly put it's a little asterisk next to it for me. That's something I'm going to check out. So it's clearly worked. And I mean, they've got other people doing it. I know they've got Jackson Laundry on the list. I saw that. who was the other name that I saw that I'm blanking for now? It was Jeannie Metzler as well, is also going to be at this one in Montreal. So
I think the arena games as a concept, as a thing, has to have some big names to draw eyes because yeah, it's great fun to watch. I loved it. I enjoyed it much more than I thought I was going to when the concept was first came about. But it's still it is still just the arena games, which is indoor racing without really going anywhere interesting. I need those names on the start list to make me watch it, and it's good to see
yeah.
them sort of starting to move back towards that.
All right. Well, the next thing we're going to talk about, again, I think I saw this come up this week, and I feel like this is a point of discussion. It could be very easy to go down a rabbit hole that I don't necessarily want to go down, but I think there's
Oh,
still a lot of positives to take out of this,
I have no idea
and
what you're going
points
to
of
be talking
discussion.
about now. I'm intrigued. Where are we going?
Oh, you should. So this, I saw this came up. It was actually, I think it was the editor of Slow Twitch, a guy called Ryan. I think his last name is. Put up an article that Slow Twitch had written, and it's very rare that I will give Slow Twitch one of my clicks. But I went and read this article, and it is about the fact that Ironman this week announced they have introduced a couple of new divisions. The first one that I think is just a positive is that they've now got a intellectual disability division
Mm-hmm.
in addition to their PC categories. So I think that's a positive. That's just great. There's so many athletes now who can sort of have their own division, which I think is fantastic. But the second division that they announced is Ironman have now created a open division where athletes can select if they want to race where they're not basically limited by, or they don't want to be limited by gender or age group racing. So you go into this open division and it doesn't matter what your gender is. It doesn't matter how old you are. It's this division. And again, I'm not going to, the implications for the transgender athletes and stuff, I think is definitely something that this is part of their decision making, I think. But what I really liked about this was the idea of you've suddenly got a division for people who aren't fussed about slots and age group placements and just want to go out there and do an Ironman without all the limitations and stuff. And I feel like that's the thing that I really, and again, not that I don't care about I think it's fantastic that you have a place that sort of, I hope, creates somewhere everybody can get the opportunity to race regardless of their how they identify and things like that. But I feel like there's so much untapped potential about this open division that I really like. So have you followed this at all, mate? Do you know about this? Is this complete news to you, or?
No, no, I saw the article come out, and I think it's an example of the world taking tentative steps in the direction that eventually will end up going in a sense where the sport and the biggest stakeholders in the sport like Ironman have to be there to accommodate everybody that wants to partake in the sport, and this is, I think, one of their first tentative steps in that direction. And you're quite right. I do like the fact there's an open division. So if you're just Jimmy doesn't give a fuck off the street who just wants to go and race a triathlon but doesn't care where they place, then you can do that and you can just rock up and not feel the pressure of being on a numbered start list or being compared to your peers. You can just go and have the experience. I think that's fantastic. I think there are other steps that need to be taken as we go towards an ecosystem that truly does cater for everybody. Because yes, this creates an open division that people who I don't identify with any particular gender or non-binary or however they do identify can compete in without feeling like they are aligning themselves with any particular gender. But this open division doesn't come with any chance for qualifying slots or anything like that. I think
Mm,
eventually we will have a division for people that are non-binary, but is also a competitive opportunity to qualify in that non-binary division for the non-binary championship division, for example. And I think that's the direction the sport will eventually and should be moving in. But some people will disagree with me. I don't really give a shit. That's my opinion. Have it.
I like the thought because I agree with everything you just said. I think that I don't need to repeat that. What I really like though is you sort of touched on is this idea that we can really push down a lot of barriers for people who are, maybe they've come to the sport, they've done one, they've been intimidated, they didn't like the fact that they got dunked in the swim, or they stand next to these people who look like professional athletes. Uh, I like the idea that we have this place that I see it as, I guess, a move towards this more mass participation versus competition model for Ironman. racing, where we're going to see the people who are just there to do an Ironman or do a 70.3, or who can do that without all of the other stuff. And you can, because I don't think there's going to be you can potentially take away a lot of the rules around racing too for these guys. Introduce, if you want to wear a snorkel in the swim, or you want to wear flippers in the swim, or you want to have floaties, or you want to have your big floatable thing that you attach to yourself when you go open water swimming. Suddenly that pushes down a lot of barriers for people who maybe can't get into triathlon because they're intimidated by that. And maybe they do one in the open division and they go, that wasn't so bad. I wouldn't mind next time moving into. I feel like that to me is the biggest positive. This breaks down a lot of the perceived barriers that people have.
And some of the gatekeepers to the sport that are like, no, it's not. If it's not done this way, it doesn't count. It's not real. You remove some of those sort of some of those hurdles where people don't feel it. It means that you can allow a little bit of flexibility in that area that you're talking about without offending the purists.
So, because you're right. What I wonder though is it because we have this, we see it's all about that, age group awards and qualifying and this sort of thing. I'm curious if this, because one of the things the article said, or I think it was somebody else said, is that everybody should enter open by default. When you enter a race, you're automatically entered into the open division, and you have to choose to go into the age group field if you want a slot, if you want a place. And I think that to me would be the way you do it. By default, you just go into the whatever, I want to do it, and then you choose not to. Do you think there is the potential downside where if this does become the practice, where suddenly we're going to see that those people who are only wanting the slots, like the competitive age groups, become very little? And do you think that could then fuel a lot of Ironman's decisions where it's like, see, people only want to participate and they take away, it becomes more like a fun run sort of thing? Do you think that's a potential where if suddenly
an interesting one, because up until the point you brought in the commercial decisions of Ironman, I was like, that's a brilliant idea, because you've got the open division, which is going to swell, and then you get these much more competitive. I've opted in to the age group competitive division, and that sounds fantastic on the face of it, doesn't it? That sounds like you'd suddenly be going back to this whole, there'd be a mass participation element, and then you'd have these really competitive fields for those that wanted to actually race for those championship position. But when you bring in, what's Ironman's response to that going to be? That's when it concerns me, because then your brain starts going, well, maybe they'll start thinking, well, there aren't many people doing these competitive age groups, and maybe we'll just get rid of those and we'll make it a fun run. That would concern me a lot. But I think I like to think Ironman are a little less short-sighted than that. I might be proved wrong, but also I think critics on both sides of this, people that are for it and people that are against it, and people that are for it but don't think it's going quite far enough. I think we all need to take a breath sometimes and think that changes take time, and tentative steps are often just the first step in a long line of changes that will eventually lead to a much more inclusive sport.
Yeah, again, that's probably my only sort of thing, is that if they suddenly go, hang on, we don't have to spend X amount of money on age group awards, and we can suddenly fill this race with twice as many people because they can all start at the same time because there's no drafting rules, or like that's my one concern. That's the skeptical side of me coming out a little bit, going, if they can see a way that suddenly they could go, hang on a second, we could make Kona open and there's no rules, and we could squish suddenly like all these extra people in or something, or that's again, just some part of me goes, and again, I guess it's a problem about Ironman as a brand, is we have this level of skepticism because I think they're so transparently, or maybe not transparently, they're so obviously trying to, again, which isn't a problem, like companies make money, but they're so motivated by financial decisions.
Well, I don't think it's not that obvious. It's like they are no more motivated by financial decisions than any other company in the world are. The difference is they are not what the audience, the participants and fans of the sport expect them to be. So there's a big gulf and a difference between
big disconnect. That's very
disconnect
true.
between what the fans and participants think Ironman should care about and what they do. And that is where we all get let down often, and therefore it just becomes and slaps us in the face sometimes, and that's the issue, I think.
I was talking with somebody this week about Ironman, and I said if the triathlon community lowered their expectations of Ironman and accepted that this is what they are, everybody wouldn't be disappointed and surprised when they do exactly what they do, and we're all not surprised that they like. if we just like, okay, this is what they do, this is how they are,
Mm,
we would
mm.
constantly just be like, yep, there we go. Instead of constantly being like, I can't believe they're doing this. I can't believe this is what they've done. I can't believe it.
Mate, ever
I've
since
been
I read
so
that,
unsurprised by things. So
ever since I read that 220 article last week that I mentioned last week, I'm fully convinced now that all Kona shots should be free, but there's no roll downs. That's how I'd do it.
yeah,
Kona slots are free. The World Championships are free to enter, but you don't get a roll down. You've actually got to qualify for it.
yeah. I mean, yeah. There's been a lot of discussions this week around Ironman's Kona stuff, and I don't necessarily need to weigh in it anymore. But I feel like, yeah, if people accepted that for Ironman, it isn't about the best in the world, I think then everybody would understand a little bit more about what motivates them
Yeah,
with that
absolutely,
Kona race. So
absolutely.
yeah, it's interesting, interesting. But again, I think the open division is a great step. There's a lot of potential, maybe a few risks, but
Yeah, and
we'll
I
see.
think
And
I think
again, no decisions final.
we're both on the same page, aren't we? Where the more people the sport accommodates and tempts into come and race it, the better.
That's what we need. We need to keep this sport
It's
growing and getting bigger and
exactly.
better and more races and spots and all that sort of stuff. Something that I hate to talk about now, but we have to, is that you were fucking right last week, mate, when we talked about Tasmania 70.3. You said Jake Birtwistle was going to win the thing, and Jake Birtwistle won the thing quite comfortably. Didn't look like it was much of a race, to be honest. I followed the tracker. I was obviously watching Charlie. Charlie had a bad day out there. Doesn't matter. Charlie's just getting started at this distance, but Jake was
Guys.
exceptional, mate.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, Jake Birtwistle racing in Tasmania. I mean, that's all I needed to hear, really, because the man likes it over there so much so he doesn't really like leaving it very much, and we know that. And his opportunity to step up to long course and for it to be a race in his home location is it was all I needed to hear to know that he was going to win it
I love
because look, he's an exceptional talent, isn't he? He's an
exceptional,
exceptional talent,
exceptional.
but he's a talent that needs motivating in certain ways, and racing in Tasmania is one of those ways.
I love the thought of Ironman Asia Pacific being like, Jake, you're one of the most iconic Australian athletes. Like, how do we get you? We'd love to see you we'd love to see you step up to middle distance racing. We'd love to get you at some of our races. What can we do as a brand to get you to race? And he'd be like, yeah, well, put a race on in Tasmania. And they're like, okay. Like it's just like accommodating. These are my list of demands. Has to be within this distance of my home. Has to be this. Has to be this. And like, okay, we'll do it. We want to get you there. But yeah, you're right, Jake. And what we said last week, I think, was that there's a lot riding on this performance. If he goes well and doesn't hate it, we could see him focus more on the middle distance. And he won it. And again, all reports seem that he enjoyed it. So I am hoping that this means we will see a lot more of Jake Birtwistle doing middle distance racing, because there has become a trend I've noticed recently, especially in the men's field and somewhat in the women's field, where those short course guys are really starting to do both. I mean, I think we saw Hayden Wild's announcement this week that he'd gone to Canyon. Again, one of the worst kept secrets in triathlon. And it said that he's focusing on short and middle distance, which, again, like, fantastic. I wish more of these guys would do it, because it's not even a case anymore that focusing on the two different distances leads to worse results, because Christian did it well before he won Tokyo Gold, and he still won Tokyo Gold. And
Yeah.
Taylor Knibb, has done both, and she got the the silver medal in the mixed team relay and things like that. So yeah, I'm all for these guys sort of dabbling more and doing things, because there's, again, the other reality is there's a lot more money to be made in middle and long course racing than there is in short course. It's hard to find lucrative sponsorships because of those weird restrictions that World Triathlon put on branding and things like that. So yeah, it's good.
I think it's exceptional. It's exceptional. I'm a
Ellie
Jake
Salthouse
Bird.
won too.
Yeah, of course she did. Of course she did.
Of course she
I'm.
did.
I hope that's an early season win for her spurs her on to carry that form throughout the season, because she's an exceptional athlete. I'm a huge Ellie Salthouse fan, as you well know, and I hope to see her go on to great things this year. Jake Birtwistle, I love the man. He's great. He's great. He reminds me of me in terms of his sort
I
of.
mean, you're almost identical to look at, mate. I think if you put you two next to each other, it would be hard to separate. Like,
I
which one's
just
which? I can't tell.
I relate to his thought process and the way he approaches things. I gel with that man. I like him.
Yeah, again, you're a person who doesn't really like to leave Devon very much. It's very hard to get you out of the place you
Well,
live,
mate,
and
I'm on the French Riviera as we speak. I'm looking. I look
that was
over
that
my
was the intention.
balcony.
That was the
Yeah.
irony of my comment, mate. But yeah, Tasmania 70.3. Good to see it again. Another pro race. That's the other thing is worth mentioning. Uh, yeah, next time let's get an international
Will
field
you
there, so it's
race
not just
it,
Aussies.
Mr. Ford?
Nope,
Will you go and race Ironman Tasmania? Have you ever been to
no,
Tasmania?
no, doesn't interest me.
Doesn't interest you, no. There's something. For some reason, my brain always thinks it's sort of cold and rainy.
Same. That's what it is in my head too, and it sounds like that's
Yeah,
what it was on race day as
and I
well.
don't know whether it is or not. It's just got that sort of cold and rainy sort of
I don't
thing
know.
about it.
I think a lot of people are guilty of when you live somewhere you don't necessarily like. I've barely explored Australia. I think the furthest west I've been is Melbourne, Perth. Perth's
Yeah.
very west. Like I've been to very few places in Australia. I'd rather travel overseas. But yeah, maybe one day we'll go there. But I don't think I'd want to go there for a 70.3. The last thing we're going to talk about this week on the podcast, mate, is a little leaked thing that came out. And I saw this was on Try Today. Again, don't have the article, but it sounds as though the potential location of the Collins Cup and date has leaked online on a now deleted page on the PTO website. It had the Collins Cup listed for the 18th and 19th of November in Marrakesh in Morocco. Now,
Fucking banging.
interesting about this, mate, is there's been a few well-known triathletes who come from the country of Norway who have been training where? In Marrakesh in Morocco at the moment. Coincidence or not? What do you think, mate?
Have you been to Marrakesh in Morocco?
I have not.
It is incredible.
Really?
It's such a cool place, man. It's I think I've traveled a fair amount, as you know, but I think it's the
Man
most
of the world?
it's the most abroad I've ever felt, if you know what I mean.
Okay.
It was just incredible. It was just so many different sights and sounds and senses and smells and different people talking to you and trying to sell you things and trying to trade your stuff for rugs. It's just such a cool place to be. And the restaurants and the food. Oh man. So yeah, I hope it is because I would like to go and watch it if it's there. Coincidence? No. I mean, who knows? I mean, look, if the PTO had some, I didn't see the page. I haven't seen it. I haven't seen a screenshot of it. But if they had a page up saying that it was going to be in Marrakesh, that's not a training exercise, is it? Do you know what I mean? It's not like someone just wrote that for the sake of it. It probably means it's going to be.
Yeah, look, I mean, full disclosure, I've heard this for months at this point. Like, again, it's one of those secrets that I don't think is necessarily a big secret. But I think nothing is. I think the response to the article on Try Today from the PTO was nothing's confirmed yet. But I would say that it's probably pretty close to being confirmed. I think it's a fantastic spot. Again, Africa, excellent. Not a place we really associate with triathlon that much. So again, let's get it somewhere iconic and different and looks great for the broadcast and stuff like that.
Indeed, and it's a
What
different
I'm
continent. And it's also incredibly easy to get to because all it is a ferry ride
correct.
from Spain. You know, it's not. It's
Exactly.
not. You ain't breaking the bank.
Well, what I though find more interesting about this, probably more so than the location, is the date. So we've got this race now coming at the end, the end of the year, middle of late November. Everything's wrapped up. One of the things I find odd a little bit about the Collins Cup is because it's kind of more of an exhibition race. That there's not. It's just like a let's celebrate, let's get the broadcast or whatever. But I feel like if you want the best people there, you need to have let the biggest races of the year have happened to work out who the best people to be there are. So by having it so late in the year now, we're going to have our Kona champions, our Nice champions, our 70.3 champions. We're going to have the rankings should basically be well and truly sorted. They shouldn't be in flux so much anymore. So I feel like we're going to see, and again, I think it's a good way to sort of wrap up the year is to make this like this is the last big event, where we're going to see a really world-class field together. The timing feels a lot better to me because it doesn't get in the way of a lot of the other championship events and
Do
things
you
like
think
that.
though we'll start to see athletes lose interest at that point? And just do you think we'll see the big players still keen to go and race there at that time of the year, or do you think we
They're
risk
getting paid,
risk?
mate.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And if the PTO are to be what the PTO profess to be, then they are owned by the athletes. So the athletes should support that and go and endeavor to make it a success. So yeah, I agree with that. But realistically, in the real world, do you think we'll see professional athletes wanting to extend their season for one more all out race?
I think we'll get them there. I don't know what sort of shape they'll be in. I don't know how hard they're going to take it. This is the point, isn't it? You never really know what you're going to get. It. Some of them will, and whatever Charles Adamo said years ago about, "I'll just put them in there," means that they're going to want to do their best, even though we pay them an appearance fee, not prize money. I'm curious to see what sort of changes. I mean, again, there are a lot of changes. Something I think is going to be announced next week's a big change for the PTO that's coming. But there's a lot of changes, and I would assume that they have probably listened and learnt a lot from what's happened the last couple of years, and are hopefully moving things forward. So I think the conversation probably people would rather, because looking at the timing of it last year, nobody I think would really have properly prepared for the Collins Cup. It would have just been something that they did in as part of their preparation for another event or on the back of another event. This might mean that we get people incentivized to actually perform. And again, maybe PTO don't just pay them an appearance, maybe make it for prize money or some actual jeopardy. That would be good. So
Yeah, I
I'm
agree.
excited to see how this race looks. I'm curious to see the location. I don't know enough about Marrakesh. I've sort of seen clips from Christian Gustav's training and some videos and stuff they've done. It looks like a pretty interesting place. So it could be an incredible location for this event. And like I said, it's good to expand into new places and new things. So
It's such a cool place, man. I love it.
there you
I
go.
love it.
Exciting times. Jimbo, we've done it, mate. We've gotten through the show. Here we are. A few little
And there was
technical
a, there
hiccups,
was a,
but we've persevered.
there was a lot to talk about. I enjoyed that.
Do you think we're a bit more up on triathlon this week, mate, or are we still being a bit down on
Mate,
it?
we were never down on triathlon. We just say how we just say how we think, don't we? You know.
It's funny. I've been criticised a lot in the past of being too positive about triathlon, and then it's too negative. And I love triathlon, mate. I think it's fantastic. I think it's the best sport on the planet. I enjoy talking about it every week. I enjoy, or thank you guys for listening, James. If they want to find out more about us, what do they need to do?
You need to wait for me to scroll down to what I have to say.
If you
If you
want to
want to find
find
out
out
more about
more,
MX Endurance, head to mxendurance.com or search MX Endurance on Facebook or at MX Endurance on Twitter or Instagram. If you want to follow me, I'm at bale.james85 on Instagram. We can follow Tim at tford14 on Instagram. Jump onto iTunes, give the show a review. You can do it in the podcast app. It's really easy and is super helpful. If you like what we're doing, tell a friend, help us grow. If you've got any suggestions, guests, comments, or criticisms, send an email to podcast@mxendurance.com, but don't do that because that email doesn't work anymore. Send a DM to Tim on Instagram. He loves it.
I do actually. You can email James at bale.james85 on Twitter. I know he loves the mentions. Yeah. Thanks, guys. Talk to you next week.
Cheerio.